Somewhere in the Strait of Malacca, in June of 1947, a radio operator on a passing ship heard something he was not supposed to hear. It was a Morse code signal, distress frequency, the kind any trained radio operator recognizes instantly and hopes never to receive. The message, when transcribed, read SOS. All officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chartroom and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. And then, after a burst of indecipherable code that no one could translate, one final transmission. 2 words. I die. Then silence. The signal was picked up by multiple vessels in the area. American ships, Dutch listening posts, British stations, all of them cross-referenced the transmission and triangulated its source. The closest vessel was an American merchant ship called the Silver Star. Its captain ordered a course change immediately. Within hours, his crew had the Ourang Medan in sight. The ship was drifting. No flag raised, no movement on deck, no response to hails. A boarding party was assembled. 8 men crossed in lifeboats to the Ourang Medan. What they found when they stepped onto the deck has been described in 4 separate accounts published across 3 countries over a period of 12 years. The core details in every version are the same. Every crew member of the Ourang Medan was dead. They were lying on their backs, faces upturned toward the sky, mouths open, eyes wide, arms reaching outward or upward as if pushing something away or reaching for something that wasn't there. There were no wounds on any of them, no blood, no sign of struggle, no visible cause of death. Even the ship's dog was dead, found in the same position, the same expression on its face. The rescue team described a specific physical sensation as they moved through the ship, a cold, not the cold of the sea, a cold in the air inside the vessel, despite the fact that the external temperature in the Strait of Malacca that day was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. They found the radio operator at his station, dead at the transmitter, his fingertips still resting on the Morse code key. He had sent the last message from exactly where they found him. The boarding party returned to the Silver Star. A decision was made to tow the Ourang Medan to the nearest port for investigation. The tow lines were attached, the 2 ships were connected, and then someone on the Silver Star noticed smoke rising from below the Ourang Medan's decks, specifically from cargo hold number 4. The tow lines were cut. Seconds later, the Ourang Medan exploded. The force of the blast lifted the ship partially out of the water. It was described by witnesses as a sequence of explosions, not a single detonation, as if something in the hold was burning in stages. The ship sank. Every body, every piece of cargo, every possible piece of evidence that might explain what had happened to the crew, all of it went to the bottom of the Strait of Malacca. The investigation was over before it began. The story circulated among maritime communities for years, and then in May of 1952, something unusual happened. The United States Coast Guard published an account of the Ourang Medan in their official proceedings, a document called the Proceedings of the Merchant Marine Council. It was presented alongside other documented maritime incidents. The implication was clear. This was a real event. In 1954, a German writer named Otto Mielke published a booklet titled Das Totenschiff in der Südsee, The Death Ship in the South Sea. Mielke knew specific details, the route the Ourang Medan was sailing, the name of its captain, and the contents of cargo hold number 4. Potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. If this was the cargo, unlicensed, improperly stored, transported without documentation on a ship that appears in no official register, then the explosion makes sense. The deaths make sense. The cold air in the hold makes sense. Cyanide compounds produce a specific atmospheric effect when they degrade. In December of 1959, a letter was received by the CIA. It referenced the Ourang Medan directly. It was written by an assistant to the director. It mentioned previous correspondence about mysterious disappearances at sea and asked whether something from the unknown might be involved. The CIA filed the letter. It was declassified decades later. It is the most official document that references the Ourang Medan by name. And here is the problem. There is no shipping record of a vessel named the Ourang Medan, not in Lloyd's Register of Ships, the authoritative global catalog of all registered seagoing vessels, not in Dutch maritime records, not in any port manifest from any port the ship was allegedly near. The ship that sent a distress signal picked up by multiple vessels, that was boarded by 8 men, that exploded in front of witnesses, does not appear to have existed.
Every story that is fabricated contains inconsistencies, not because the fabricator is careless, but because reality is consistent in ways that imagination is not. The Ourang Medan story contains inconsistencies that researchers have been cataloging for 70 years. The first is the date. Most accounts place the incident in June of 1947, but British newspapers reported the story in November of 1940, not as a rumor, as news, describing a distress call, a boarding, dead crew members, 7 years before the event allegedly happened. Unless there were 2 ships named the Ourang Medan that experienced identical tragedies 7 years apart, which is not a theory anyone has seriously proposed, the dates cannot both be correct. The second inconsistency is the location. Different accounts place the ship near the Solomon Islands, others place it in the Strait of Malacca, others near the Marshall Islands. These locations are thousands of miles apart. A ship cannot be in all of them. The third is the survivor. Some versions of the story include a survivor, a man named Jerry Rabbit, described as the second officer, who allegedly washed up on a Pacific atoll and told his story to a missionary before dying. The atoll named in the story is approximately 5,000 miles from where the ship was supposedly found, in a lifeboat. No record of a man named Jerry Rabbit has ever been found. No missionary on that atoll has been identified. No account from any Pacific mission station references this encounter. The fourth inconsistency is the source. The story first appeared in print, attributed to a journalist named Silvio Shirley, writing in the Italian newspaper Il Piccolo di Trieste in 1948. Shirley claimed to have spoken directly to the survivor. He provided specific details, names, dates, cargo manifests, the route of the ship. Researchers who have tried to verify Silvio Shirley's credentials have found very little. He appears to have been a real person. Whether he fabricated the story, embellished a real event, or genuinely reported what he was told, no one has been able to confirm. What can be confirmed is this: Shirley's story, with its invented or embellished details, spread from an Italian newspaper to Dutch publications, to German magazines, to American maritime records, to British tabloids, and eventually to an official United States Coast Guard document, all without a single piece of verifiable primary evidence. One determined person, or perhaps one determined story, traveled from a regional Italian newspaper to the files of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States in 11 years.
There is a version of this story that does not require the supernatural, does not require a hoax, and does not require anything except the chaos of the years immediately following World War II. In 1947, Southeast Asia was in a state of profound instability. The Japanese occupation had ended 2 years earlier. Colonial powers were attempting to reassert control. Black markets for weapons, chemicals, and military surplus were operating throughout the region. Ships carrying undocumented cargo were not unusual. Ships operating under false names were not unusual. The cargo theory proposes this. The Ourang Medan was a real vessel, operating under a false name, carrying illegal chemical cargo, most likely potassium cyanide, which was used extensively in post-war industrial processing and which would have been highly profitable on the black market. Potassium cyanide, improperly stored, can release hydrogen cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide is colorless and odorless. It kills quickly. It kills without leaving marks on the body. It can cause a specific kind of cold, not thermal cold, but the sensation of cold in a sealed environment as it displaces oxygen. This would explain the expressions on the faces of the crew. Hydrogen cyanide poisoning produces involuntary muscle contractions, including of the face, the open mouths, the wide eyes, the reaching hands. It would explain the rapid decomposition of the bodies. Hydrogen cyanide accelerates certain biological processes. It would explain the explosion. Nitroglycerin, also reported as part of the cargo, is highly unstable. In the heat of the Strait of Malacca, in an improperly ventilated hold, its detonation would produce exactly the sequence of explosions described by witnesses, burning in stages, not all at once. And it would explain the absence of the ship from any official record. A vessel carrying unlicensed cyanide compounds and nitroglycerin across international waters would not be registered. It would not appear in Lloyd's. It would not have a verifiable port history. Its operators would have every reason to ensure it could never be found. If this theory is correct, then the reason the Ourang Medan does not exist in the official record is not because the story was invented. It is because someone worked very hard to ensure it could not be found. Professor Theodor Seersdorfer of Essen, Germany, spent 50 years researching this case. He concluded that a real event occurred, that a real ship sank, that the story Shirley published was not invented from nothing. It was a real event that Shirley dramatized and embellished, filling gaps with details that made it more compelling and less verifiable. The truth, if it exists, is somewhere in the water, along with whatever was in cargo hold number 4.
What does the documented record actually say if we strip away everything that cannot be verified? A distress signal was received by multiple ships. This is documented in the Coast Guard proceedings of 1952 and referenced in multiple independent publications across different countries. A ship named the Ourang Medan was identified as the source. Multiple crews reported boarding it. Multiple accounts described the same scene. Dead crew, no wounds, expressions of terror. The ship exploded and sank before any official investigation could be conducted. This is consistent across all versions of the story. No registration record for a ship named the Ourang Medan has been found. No port record, no crew manifest, no construction record. The ship appears in no authoritative maritime database. A journalist named Silvio Shirley published the most detailed account. His credentials have not been verified. His source, a dying survivor on a Pacific atoll, has not been confirmed. The geographic distance between the alleged location of the ship and the atoll where the survivor was found is not navigable in the time described. The CIA correspondence referencing the Ourang Medan is real. It is declassified. It does not confirm the story. It confirms that the story was circulating at a high enough level that someone in proximity to the CIA director found it worth filing. This is the documented record. It neither confirms nor denies the existence of the ship. It tells us that something happened, or that something was reported as having happened, and that the evidence required to confirm or deny it burned and sank in the Strait of Malacca before anyone could examine it. What the Ourang Medan story does, regardless of whether it is true, is reveal something about the relationship between a story and a record. A story told persistently enough, with enough specific detail, enters the record. It gets cited, it gets published in official documents, it gets filed by intelligence agencies, and once it is in the record, it becomes almost impossible to remove, because the record is what we use to determine what is real. Silvio Shirley, if he fabricated this story, achieved something remarkable. He created an event that never happened and placed it in the files of the government of the United States of America. Or someone, somewhere in the Strait of Malacca in 1947, died on a ship whose operators made sure it could never be found. Both of these things are true in the way that stories are true. Neither has been proven in the way that facts are proven. Subscribe to Dark Pages. Every case on this channel is documented. Every source is in the description below, and not all of them have a bottom. This was Dark Pages.